Listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Karen Goldner with the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago. Welcome to our webinar, Make Your Operations More Profitable. This is me. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here at the Women's Business Development Center. And I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. If we could do poll 1, please. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see questions. And the first question is going to be, oh, hold on one second. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, we're not going to be doing polls today, so let's not worry about that at all. Okay. So anyway, so that's me. So today in the webinar, we are going to talk about how you can use some really very powerful tools to improve your company's performance and make your business more profitable, and avoid getting into kind of a blaming type of environment, which can be sort of a natural thing sometimes to happen when you're talking about problems in a company, but generally isn't very productive. So I would also encourage you to look in our archived webinars on the WBDC website for some sales programs we did in May, and also some other sales-related webinars if you're interested in the sales side. We're going to be talking about the operations side today. During the webinar, we're going to be focusing on the use of 3 growth wheel tools. They're listed here, a couple of worksheets and a kind of action plan document. You can download those during the webinar. They will not be available after the webinar. So we archive these webinars. They go on our website, and people can look at them all the time, including you. But when, because of our license agreement with Growth Wheel, we can't just leave the tools up. So on the right-hand side of your screen on the webinar toolbar, you should see something that says handouts, and you can just download those during the webinar. If you have questions or problems with that, please just put a little question in the question box, and then we'll make sure we get it taken care of. On that same topic, if you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please feel free to go ahead and type the question in, and I will get you an answer either at that moment, or if I'm going to be covering that material a little bit later, I'll get to it at that point. If you've been in our webinars before with Growth Wheel, you will remember that Growth Wheel has really 4 kind of quadrants. Every business needs an attractive business concept, lasting customer relations, a strong organization, and then profitable operations. And of course, that's the one that we're focusing on today, are the focus area on really in the production delivery aspect. The things we're going to talk about, though, are true whether you are a service business or a product business, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let's first of all just kind of get some jargon out of the way, because I think that sometimes people hear these things and they seem so difficult and confusing, and they're not. It's like anything. If you know it, you know it. So, excuse me. Lean manufacturing is the first thing I want to just talk about. It's really a set of tools that help you streamline your processes. As you might imagine, it was originally designed for manufacturing, but a lot of the same thinking goes into any kind of business. And we're going to be talking about a service business actually later today in an example. Six Sigma is something that you may have heard of. That's a very detailed program that people spend, weeks and weeks learning and years implementing. But the top line summary of it is that it uses data to reduce defects. GE was a big proponent of this, very early adopter back in the 90s. Then there's the Toyota Production System, or people sometimes call it TPS. Obviously, this is something Toyota created. It's a series of processes to reduce waste. And you may also have heard of some of these Japanese words and wondered what the heck they mean. Muda is one that a lot of times you might hear in this business. It means waste. So they're simply, the Japanese words for different kinds of inefficiencies. And then people often have heard the word Kaizen, which really just means continuous improvement. And that's an important concept in this whole realm because it really says that there's no perfect state. You make improvements, you make the system better, and then you keep making improvements and keep making the system better. And then lastly, a process map, which is a tool that we use to map out, as you might assume, and analyze your processes. And we're going to see one of those later in the webinar. So how does this apply to my business? Well, every business has processes. Every business can perform better. And then as you grow particularly, what used to work may no longer be effective or efficient. And think about how much time you spend putting out fires. So here's my little firefighter. And the question really is, can you afford not to invest in improving your business? Because this isn't an investment. It's not just, you know, automatic. So where should you start, people ask? Well, you want to pick a tool, and we'll see a few of them. And then remember common sense. One of the things that sometimes, like any kind of, sometimes, I guess I'll just say that sometimes Six Sigma feels a little culty to me. And, you know, the key thing here is you remember it's a tool. The use of a tool is to accomplish work, right? And so just, you know, don't feel like you have to go overboard. And that's really where the lean process comes into this, or the lean thought, which is you don't need a full-time, you know, Six Sigma black belt to go around and drive everybody nuts. You really want to just know what these steps are and then use them as you need to. Okay, so I'm going to show you this next slide. It's a little big. Just don't be afraid, okay? Here it is, waste reduction. So this is one of the Growth Wheel tools that you possibly have downloaded, and as I mentioned before, you really do want to download before the end of the webinar. So well, let's just start here. So we go overproduction. This is one type of waste. So that's kind of an easy one to understand. Are you making more than you need? Then if you're filling this out for your business, you might, you know, indicate how that happens today, and then whether it's low, medium, or high, because you're going to focus on those areas that are high priority. Idle time. We're going to see examples of most of these in a few minutes. Do you have a process where something gets done, one step gets done, and then it just sits until a second step can be done? And so that would be idle time. Unnecessary transportation. Are you taking stuff from here to there, you know, without needing to? Unnecessary movement. This is like unnecessary transportation, only it's more internal. Do you have too much inventory? You know, maybe you are a cupcake shop and you've got enough cupcake wrappers to last you until the next, you know, decade. That may be too much inventory. Errors and defects. Errors in this instance can either be mistakes, but also they're simply either misunderstandings or some kind of bad process. So it's not necessarily that a person did something incorrectly once. It's something is being done incorrectly over and over again. And then are there additional processes? Do you have to do things twice? You know, things get done badly, so then they have to be repeated, that kind of thing. Unused knowledge. So you have staff that basically could do better than they're in a way allowed to do by your current process. And then unused knowledge. So often, I'm sorry, lack of motivation. So are people being motivated to not behave efficiently? Okay. We're going to now talk about a process called 5Y, which sounds real techy, but it's not so hard. Actually, you'll laugh at it in a minute. So it's designed to get to the root cause of a problem. And again, error means something that isn't working, right? Not necessarily just a one single mistake. So where does the name 5Y come from? It means you ask why 5 times. That is what it means. So I'm going to show you an example of that with another growth wheel tool. And that example is going to be that the daily deposits aren't balancing. Okay, you have a retail store, and more often than not, your daily deposits aren't balancing. Okay, so here is a process that you can use a tool for that. You would write down the error, daily deposits aren't balancing. Then who is affected by the error? Well, the person who does the deposit the night before, the bookkeeper, you as the owner, maybe the bank, and then what are the consequences? Well, one consequence is that you have to spend extra time, or either you or the bookkeeper, if there's two different people, have to spend time, recounting, figuring it out, what actually went wrong. You, the person who closed at your store the night before may have some, I don't know, blame put toward them or something, like there's some suspicion, right? So that's not a good consequence. So, that's the problem that we're going to work on. So let's ask, first of all, why? Right? What is the first why? Why are they not balancing? Well, the employee isn't counting the money properly. Okay? Well, then the next thing is you ask is, why is the employee not counting the money properly? Well, the employee says that she doesn't have the time to count the money twice in order to ensure accuracy. So she would like to count it twice just to make sure she gets it correct. And she doesn't have time before she closes the shop. Why is that? Well, the employee doesn't have the time because the store closes at 9 and she's expected to clock out by 10 after 9. And why is she expected to clock out by 10 after 9? Because you don't want to have higher labor costs than you need to. And why is that? Because your profit margins are thin. So when you think through all that, you end up with kind of the root cause of the problem, right? Which is that time is money, and that you aren't giving her enough time when she needs it, and so then you end up taking extra time later in order to fix the problem. So you might decide that the amount of money, so then you look at potential solutions. You might decide that the amount of money or the amount of time, which is money, that you're spending dealing with this problem is worth 5 minutes extra per shift, which is a half an hour a week, say, if you're open 6 days a week. But it helps you understand that it's not, it's not somebody's fault. We're not going to say, oh, she's a bad employee because she can't get the counting right. It's simply a matter of, she doesn't have the time to do it, and so she feels rushed. And so, it may be worth 5 extra minutes so that you can save the bookkeeper's time the next day. Okay, as you are thinking about processes in your business, there are really 3 areas, okay? There's policy, and that's both written and unwritten. I'll show you kind of an example of that, which might help you think that through. And lots of businesses have unwritten policies, right? I'm not talking about that you haven't documented something. I'm saying that your policy says one thing, but everybody in the business operates as if the policy were something else, or they ignore that written policy. Procedures are the same way. You can have established procedures, but then there's the worn path, or what people actually do. And then the last area that impact process are people. So it could be that the person's a bad fit for the job. It could be that they've been given bad training. It could be that they're just a bad employee. But notice that you really want to think through these other aspects, policy, procedures, and then fit and training before you make the assumption that the problem is that the employee is bad. Because if, for instance, in this previous example, if we had decided, well, the employee was incompetent and she can't balance and therefore we just need to get rid of her, you bring in another person into that system, that other person may have a similar problem, right? You haven't necessarily solved the problem. So here's a picture which I think can illustrate the worn path, right? So here is your official policy or your official procedure, And this is how people actually behave, right? They're not going to go all the way around here. They're going to go this way. Now, you might think that that's bad news, but look at it from this point of view. Sometimes those shortcuts and workarounds can give you good ideas for improving your procedure, right? So maybe this should become the official procedure because it's shorter, more efficient, whatever. Okay, so let's talk about how this works. Here's another little example we're going to use. Assume we have a small, landscaping maintenance company, and the problems that we are having is that it takes a long time to get cost estimates to our customers. And we've received complaints about the receptionist not returning calls and emails. So there's really a couple problems here. Okay, so this is a process map. And as you can see, I mean, I just drew this. These are not any fancy thing. It helps if you can do it on a chalkboard or a whiteboard, but you can also just do it on a piece of paper. You want to label it. So this is a process map for what? My inbound sales process. And you want to date it because you'll, want to remember when you did this, okay? So here's the process. The prospect either calls or sends in an online form. If they call, the receptionist answers the call, and she takes an order using her own form. Oops, sorry, I went to the wrong thing. We'll get to that part in a minute. Then the receptionist enters the form or enters the order into Google Forms to get pricing. And then she sends it to the owner who reviews it to confirm the cost estimate. The owner may need a site visit, and if she does that, she goes back out, and then she goes over and provides the final estimate, and then she provides the written estimate to the prospect. If it comes online, the receptionist gets an email notice. She ensures the order is complete, which often means that she has to contact the client. That comes back, so she contacts the client, and then she ensures the order is complete. Then she enters it into Google Form for pricing, and then the process is the same. So you want to make sure here, actually, when you're doing this, that you say what tool the owner is using to produce the final estimate. So my process map here is a little bit incomplete. I should have said, what is she using? Is it just a Word document, or does she have a template? And then this last step, written estimate, is emailed to the prospect, should have said by whom. So when the owner does it, the owner sends it back to the receptionist, or some other person does it. So then we want to start going through and figuring out how long each of these things takes. So there's a lapse time of a couple hours between when the receptionist ensures that the order is complete and when she can get it entered into Google Pricing, because she's very busy. And then we put in all of these other time things. So it takes her a couple hours to get it into Google Pricing, no matter where it comes, or the Google form. But then look at this, there's 2 to 3 days before when the owner reviews the Google form. And there can be up to 4 days in terms of having the owner have time to get out to the job site to be able to produce the estimate. And then you end up with another day that the owner takes to make the estimate, and then you can have a little time or almost a whole day to get the estimate emailed to the prospect. So this area here is where we're going to focus on initially, but recognize that this whole system, if you go through and add up all of these various paths, can take 13 days. That's almost 3 business weeks. So when you say that the receptionist isn't returning calls, you might do kind of a 5 why. The receptionist isn't returning or isn't calling the owner back. Why is that? Well, because she doesn't, sorry, not the owner, the customer, because she doesn't have anything to tell the customer, and she doesn't have anything to tell the customer because you, as the owner, have, a week, really a business week and a half, tied up in getting the estimate back. This is an important thing to note, that she is made her own little form just that she uses because it's helpful to help make sure that she gets all the right information. One of the delays here is the fact that the online form is not getting all the information that the receptionist at least believes that she needs to get to the owner in order to get a cost estimate. So you might look at, as one of the solutions, for instance, this informal form, and maybe that becomes, addition to the online form. The other thing that you're going to want to think through is this process here. Is there a way to eliminate the need for a site visit or to do it more efficiently? Or maybe the owner says, I'm only going to do site visits on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings, or something like that, to try and at least speed this process up a little bit. And it may be then that the owner is so busy that she doesn't have time to get this final estimate together, so it might be better if the receptionist did that, okay, and handled this contact back to the prospect. So this gives you an idea of what a process map is. It's just writing everything down the way it actually happens, and I guess that's really the key thing. There's not a document in this business that has all of these steps written down necessarily. Certainly, this part is probably not written down. This part would not be written down. Oops. But you need to map it in order to really understand how things actually work. So the owner herself may not be able to do this process map on her own. She probably needs to talk to the receptionist to find out what actually happens when a customer either calls in or sends in their request for a quote online. Okay, the third tool that you can download then is this action plan, 30, 60, 90-day plan. And you can use this for anything you want to do, but I thought it was especially helpful in this system because you're, by definition, going to have some change. And this is a pretty simple change that we're talking about, and it assumes that we've got buy-in from the receptionist, okay? So she wants to do better. She's not happy when people are calling and complaining about her. And she's already taken it upon herself, as you may recall, to make her own little form, so clearly she wants to, do a better job. So if you're going to then start doing something about this, the key activity here is creating the process map, right? You identify the key employees. We did that the first week. Meet with those employees. So this is how we did this process map in fiction. In reality, of course, I just made it. But if I were going to be doing it for a real business, I would sit down, as I said, with the receptionist, find out how it works, find out what is working and what's not working. This is all kind of part of the same conversation. And then brainstorm in the areas of policies, procedure, and people, what we can do to improve the situation. Then we create a timetable for the change and assign responsibility. So who's going to be the person who actually takes the receptionist's work, kind of informal worksheet and turns it into the online form. So maybe the receptionist can do that herself. Maybe you have to send it to the person who handles your website, just depending on all those kinds of things. Maybe you want to do it yourself. Then you want to monitor for progress. And as you can see, this goes on every week. So if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, is what people say. And that is largely true. Until we did the process map, which I'll go back to, we didn't know that it took that long. You weren't necessarily aware that it took that long to get the estimates out to customers. But now you do, so in order to see whether you're doing better, you want to, again, monitor for progress. So let's see how many hours it's taking to do every step as we go ahead, so that we can say, yeah, you know, it used to take 13 days, and now the worst that we're doing is 9 days, and the average that we're doing is 3 days. So that's really improvement, right? And you want to celebrate those, which comes down to here, evaluate the changes. So it may be that changing that online form really doesn't accomplish anything, because people still aren't filling it out, and they don't understand it, and they don't, you know, it's just, you're going to have that human interaction. That may be possible. And so then let's think through what might be some other solutions, right? So that's the process that you have. If the solutions that you put in place as you measure them and monitor for them for progress aren't working, then you need to maybe go back to the 5Y tool, or think through different kinds of waste from the initial waste reduction tool. So all that gets into managing change. Now, managing change is a recognition that organizational change, a company doesn't change. It's really the sum of the changes of each individual employee. Now, managing change is a whole huge topic. And we're not going to talk about it very much today just because of time. But I do want to make you aware of a very cool tool called ADKAR, which is a product of a company called ProSci that does change management consulting. What does ADKAR mean? Or you might say, who is ADKAR? But it's a what, it's not a who, even though it sounds like some sort of, I don't know, Disney prince or something. A stands for awareness, D is desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. In order to change, a person has to be aware that there's a problem. They have to want to change. They have to know how to change. They have to have the ability to carry out that change, and then they need reinforcement. Let me give you another example. Let's say you are having cash flow problems in your business because you're not getting paid in a timely manner from your customers. And you find out, and let's say that this is a pretty good-sized training business. So, you know, it's not just you. It's the owner, and then there's several trainers, and then there's a bookkeeper who handles the billing. So she's not sending out bills for 2 weeks, you find out. Well, of course, that means, you know, you're not collecting in the meantime. So you march down to her, and let's call her Judy, and say, Judy, what the heck, you know, and you go through a process map and realize what is happening. But in order to change, Judy has to be aware that there's a problem. So if the employee doesn't even know that what they're doing is causing a problem elsewhere in the system, the first thing you have to do is make them aware. Then you have to figure out whether Judy wants to change, okay? And this can be sort of carrots and sticks, but let me give you this example, because I think that this happens more often than not. So Judy may be aware that there is a cash flow problem. I mean, she's the bookkeeper, right? So she sees the, you know, both sides of your finances. And she may want to change. She may, you know, be frustrated by this, right? Does she know what needs to be done? Well, one of the things that needs to be done, obviously, is the bills need to get sent out on time, or earlier than they're being sent out. But let's say in this situation the problem is that when she had done that before, sent out the invoices when she believed the training was completed, she found out from some of the trainers that no, the process isn't done yet. The customer's manager wanted the trainer to come back for some additional work, or there was some additional follow-up that was needed, and the bill was sent out too soon and looked awkward, right? So it's not just the knowledge that the change needs to be Judy sending out the bill sooner, but what else would it be, right? That Judy needs to have some kind of knowledge about how to determine that the job's actually done. And in the absence of that, what she's been doing is just waiting a couple of weeks and figuring, well, if it, you know, if I don't hear anything in a couple of weeks, then I'm okay. So that gets into ability. So right now, Judy has, I mean, the ability to send out a bill, right? But she doesn't necessarily feel that she has the ability to do it from a procedural point of view, because she feels like she needs additional information from the trainers themselves. So the change here may be that the trainers themselves need to shoot Judy an email when the project is actually closed out and ready to bill. And then Judy can do that, you know, send out the bill right away. So it's not just that Judy is, you know, taking long coffee breaks and hanging out and not paying attention. And if you don't go through essentially a process map, you won't identify the problem, and then you can't make a change that we then reinforce. So then what you want to make sure of is that you are following up with your trainers on a regular basis to say, hey, you know, did you send Judy the email when your training was done? And following up with Judy and making sure that she's getting those emails and also that she's sending out the bills in a more timely manner. What's interesting about ADKAR is that you have to do it in order. If I'm not aware that a change needs to happen, then it doesn't matter whether I can do it or not, because I'm not going to, because I don't even know it needs to be done, right? The desire thing can become a little tricky for people, right, in businesses. But you want to try and get your employees to buy in, and most of the time, most employees really want to do a good job. You know, it's just a matter of them sometimes feeling frustrated that they're operating the system like Judy was, where she didn't feel like she could do a good job. The other thing about desire is you might almost think of it also as lack of fear. So sometimes people may be afraid of change because they don't know what needs to be done, or they don't feel that they have the ability to do this. What if the new change requires me to do more traveling out of town or something, and that doesn't work for my family situation, then I'm going to do everything I can to sabotage that change because I'm afraid that I will then lose my job. So you want to think through them in order. So is if awareness is the problem, make people aware first, and then desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement in that order. So it's important to remember just a few quick things. Avoid blame, right? Don't immediately assume that the process is because somebody is messing up. It might very well just be a process problem, or whether it's a policy or a procedure, or people, possibly training, possibly ability and fit, and then again, it could be that somebody's just plain doing something wrong and you need to deal with termination. But often it's these other problems first. Be open to new ideas, right? When Judy tells you that she needs some kind of notice from the trainers that their work is done, I mean that's an improvement. But it's you learning something about the process and being open to that, and not just saying, no, Judy, we just need you to send out those bills right on time. And then the last thing, for all the process improvement that you can do and that you should do, and always wanting to try to be more efficient, don't confuse, don't think you can cut your way to growth, okay? So if you are growing a lot and you need to be more efficient in order to maintain production or service delivery schedule, do that. But if your problem is that your sales are inadequate, the long-term plan there needs to be growing your sales. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the content portion. So what can you do next? You can download those tools again, please do, and work through them on your own for specific problems within your own company. You can make an appointment to see myself or Meg Herman, who are the Certified Growth Wheel Advisors here in the Chicago office if you're in our area. If you're outside of Chicago, you can find the closest SBDC by going to the SBA's website. And then you can determine there may be other tools. As we saw earlier in the webinar, Growth Wheel has tools about virtually everything. So if you're having issues with a business partner, or maybe you're trying to figure out how to do better marketing or social media, we can certainly help you with that. And then also always look at our webinar and other workshop series at the wbdc.org. I also want to make sure to mention that we have a full office out in Aurora, and I know that one of our advisors out there is actually on this call. Normally when we are able to do the polls, we can find out if anybody is from the western suburbs. But if anyone is, you can find our Aurora office through the wbdc.org website, or just call our office and we can get you connected with them out there. How do you set up an appointment? If you're in the Chicagoland area, there's no charge for any session, any advising session. We can either meet in person or by phone. You need to complete an intake form, which we'll get to you, and you get kind of the 50-minute hour sort of thing to go over whatever issues you are interested in or concerned about. Here is our phone number. If you're an established business, please just ask to see me, Karen Goldner. If you're more of a startup, you can talk with Meg Herman. And then again, if you're out in the Aurora area, we can get you set up with one of our advisors there. So, are there any questions? I hope that this has been helpful. Process improvement is such a giant topic, and I think that it is, as I said before, a little culty sometimes, and so it's kind of exclusionary, which is unfortunate because I think that processes like process mapping and the tools that you have hopefully downloaded now can really help you think through in an analytical way the policies, procedures, and people issues within your organization that may be keeping you from growing and getting better. So there aren't any questions, which is fine, and I'm going to just ask Eleni to close out our webinar in a couple minutes to give you all a chance to download the tools one more time. Again, the tools are not available after the webinar. They won't be on the archive website, but the webinar itself will be. So if you wanted to go back through and look at it, you certainly can. I think that we'll just say thank you very much now and close up the webinar, and hope that everybody has a wonderful afternoon. Thanks very much.